The 2025 NFL Draft is almost here. I can just see the prospects crying with their family members as they get drafted in Green Bay, Wisconsin. And the next couple of days when they're all over video, hanging out with maybe it's a small party, maybe it's a big party. So many fun things happen when the draft finally gets here. There's four burning questions about the Houston Texans and this year's NFL Draft that I will do my darndest to answer here in a moment. I want to remind you, myself, Landry Locker from the Locker Room, we want to see you at the Karbach Biergarten on April 26th. It's the third day of the NFL Draft. We'll hang out together in the beer garden at Karbach. We'll watch day 3 of the draft, talk about what it went down in days 1 and 2. Did they answer some of these questions that we have about this Texans draft that is coming in just over a week? So we want to see you there at Karbach Brewing on April 26th, starting at 11 a.m. and goes till who knows. We're going to have some fun. Watch the NFL Draft. So question number 1. What's the plan with the offensive line when it comes to the draft picks? The Texans traded away Laramie Tunsil. They got rid of Shaq Mason and Kenyon Green, and they added Laken Tomlinson, Ed Ingram, and Cam Robinson. Tomlinson and Robinson were free agent signings. Ed Ingram was a low draft pick that they traded for his services. But what's the plan with the offensive line? What are they going to do in this upcoming draft? The popular pick for the Texans amongst draft prognosticators when they put a mock draft together is, of course, the offensive line in the first round. But what position on the offensive line? Because what they do in the first round is going to dictate how they operate and if they dip into the offensive line again in rounds 2 and beyond. So if the Texans go with a tackle, well, which tackle are they going with? If it's Kelvin Banks Jr. from Texas, well, he can play guard right away for you and then eventually play tackle for the Houston Texans. So he's got a 2025 use and then a 2026 and beyond use for the Texans. But most of the other tackles that they could draft there at 25, I don't know where they're playing in 2025. If they draft Josh Simmons from Ohio State, Simmons is coming off of a serious knee injury and might not be ready to play the start of the 2025 season. And even if he does, you got Blake Fisher, you got Cam Robinson. Where's Josh Simmons going to play? He can't play guard. He hasn't played any little bit of guard at all. And again, the major knee injury that he's coming off of, what are you doing? So if you're drafting an offensive lineman in 2025 that maybe can't help you in 2025, you're probably dipping into the offensive line again there on day 2, don't you think? Probably with a guard who has a easier path to starting in 2025. I would say the same thing for Josh Connerly Jr., the tackle from Oregon. If the Texans drafted him, well, then they're not going to have a spot right away for Connerly. I know he tried his hand at guard at the Senior Bowl, and maybe the Texans would give that a go, but he's best suited as a tackle. Now, a draft pick for the future, especially on the offensive line, not unheard of. That's exactly what they did with Blake Fisher. They knew their tackle situation was settled heading into 2024, still had Fisher, break glass in case of emergency. Wouldn't you know it, they needed Fisher in 2024. I suppose you could say that is the case with a first-round tackle. Break glass in case of emergency. Josh Simmons, if he gets healthy in time. Josh Connerly, if Cam Robinson or Blake Fisher falters. And heck, maybe if competition is the name of the game, one of those rookie tackles could beat out one of the current tackles, but it's going to make some sort of investment feel like an incorrect investment. If a rookie beats out Blake Fisher, well, then Fisher was a bad pick in 2024. And if a rookie beats out Cam Robinson, could you have spent the money a little bit better in free agency? Maybe a guard, perhaps, that's a bit more proven than what Laken Tomlinson and Ed Ingram bring to the table. Now, if the Texans are drafting a guard in the first round, I still believe they would try to double dip and add another offensive lineman at a later point. But if they go guard early, for example, let's say Alabama's Tyler Booker at 25. If they go with Booker at 25, their next offensive lineman that they draft could indeed be a guard if you draft them, say, in the second or third round, or perhaps they would draft a tackle that needs just a little bit of seasoning. Someone like Charles Grant from William and Mary, smaller school guy, but has the frame and the size to maybe make it work eventually at tackle at the NFL level. Or maybe Anthony Belton, like the North Carolina product, could maybe play guard for you, but probably is best served as a future option at tackle. Again, the Texans have extra draft capital on day 2. They've got the 58th overall pick and then 79 and 89. If they got, say, I don't know, a wide receiver and a guard, they could maybe draft that tackle of the future. It's worth noting, Blake Fisher, he's under contract for a couple more years, but Cam Robinson, only a 1-year deal. Same with Trent Brown, who is a depth piece on the offensive line. And who knows how long Titus Howard is going to be on this team and if he's even an option at tackle for the Houston Texans. So what's the plan with the offensive line? Well, the Texans will have to give us a pretty clear picture with that first selection if it is indeed an offensive lineman. If it's a guard, they could probably go with another guard or a tackle. If it's a tackle, they probably need to go with a guard on day 2 or make a move into the early part of day 3 and find themselves with some additional options along that offensive line. Plus, just keep this in the back of your mind. If they draft Tyler Booker, his lack of athleticism leads me to believe that they'll be running something more towards a gap or power scheme. Just keep that in the back of your mind. Booker not really set for a zone type of scheme with his lack of athleticism. So question number 1, as it should be, about the offensive line. Question number 2, how many pass catchers will the Texans add in this upcoming NFL draft? Notice I said pass catchers, not just wide receiver, because they could do with a few pass catchers. And the way you could phrase that out is obviously wide receiver or wide receivers, tight end, and a pass catching running back, someone that could maybe handle third down duties, someone that you believe could go out there and pass block on third down, perhaps challenge Dare Agumbawale for his spot on the roster right now. But let's start with the wide receivers. They should have some options at 25, though it feels unlikely that 2 or 3 of the top guys are going to be available to them at 25, but they'll definitely have some options on day 2. And with 3 selections on day 2, as well as a lot of draft capital in the 2026 draft. Remember, they've got an extra second-round pick and an extra fourth-round pick from the Laramie Tunsil trade. They could be moving around on day 2 of this upcoming draft and getting exactly what they want at the wide receiver spot. If they want somebody that is for sure going to play outside opposite Nico Collins, there's options for that. If they want someone that's got a little bit of versatility and maybe could settle into a slot spot after Christian Kirk departs, certainly options for that as well. But there need to be multiple pass catchers added to the equation for the Houston Texans. I know they added Justin Watson and Braxton Berrios in free agency, and I know they brought back Brevin Jordan with a contract extension towards the back end of last year, but the Texans could still do with more options to help out C.J. Stroud and maybe just turn that quarterback spot into a little bit of an easier job for C.J. Stroud. How hard did it look last year because guys weren't getting open or couldn't get open? And as you know, injury history's very prevalent in the wide receiver room right now. Nico Collins has a significant injury history, and so does Christian Kirk. So having more bodies and more options at wide receiver, that'd be a big one for the Houston Texans. Tight end, you might need to find just the perfect situation, the perfect spot, somebody that has a role right away. Again, 2025 is the focus. You want to have guys that have a very clear role, and I understand the Texans already have 3 tight ends on the roster that you could absolutely see making the 53-man roster, Dalton Schultz, Brevin Jordan, and Cade Stover, they could keep a fourth tight end pretty much with ease. They could keep a fourth tight end. So it's not out of the question that if they drafted a rookie, certainly on day 2, but even late in day 3, that guy would have a chance to be on the team and be a new pass catcher in the equation. And then pass catching running backs, I don't know that that'd be an early investment, but certainly there's some, I don't want to say one-dimensional, but primarily receiving dimensional running backs that can be available late. The guy that I think of the most, Woody Marks from USC. That's a guy to keep your eye on late in this draft. If he makes it late, there might be some team that sees Marks' usefulness in third downs and make that investment a little bit early. But heck, if you ended up with a running back early and also Woody Marks late, I'd be totally on board with that. Question number 3 is actually about, will they be able to get a running back? We just talked about multiple pass catchers. We talked about multiple offensive linemen. You could very easily say tackle, guard, and 2 wide receivers in the first 4 picks, and that's exactly what the Texans could use and what I would say they even need. You'd be addressing those needs with those first 4 selections, but man, it'd be nice to add another talented running back behind Joe Mixon. I just don't believe in Dameon Pierce. He's had injury troubles. He hasn't adapted well after his rookie season to scheme changes, and here we are with another scheme change. Now, maybe it better suits his skill set, but you can't bet on Dameon Pierce taking you to where you need to go if you're the Houston Texans. If he does, it's a bonus, but you should still have options. Joe Mixon cannot. Joe Mixon, I say it again, cannot be the lone toter of the rock for this team the upcoming season. He's getting to a point in his career where some of that wear and tear could show up, and if he gets hurt, there's currently nobody behind him that I have any confidence in. There should be options basically every time the Texans are on the clock to invest in the running back spot. Now, I'm not advocating for 6 or 7 running backs in this draft. No. But there should be a worthwhile player. You don't draft him in the first round. You maybe get on the clock at 58. There should be a couple of notable names there. Same with 79 and 89 for the Texans in this upcoming draft. So plenty to like at this running back position. One of the deepest running back classes in a long time for the NFL draft. So couple of options available for the Texans. I feel like if they could get that guy on day 2, sort of like maybe it's a guard early, then a wide receiver, then a running back and another guard, that'd be a pretty fun first 4 picks for the Houston Texans and for helping out CJ Stroud and making that thing easier on offense. Now, I talked about that offense. They're not going to keep DeMeco Ryans locked in a broom closet for this entire draft, okay? They're going to get a defensive player. Now, I know they went out there, and there weren't that many guys that they needed to add on defense, but there were a lot of spots on the 2 deep where they needed to bring bodies in. But they've spent a lot of money on the defense, brought in a couple of names from free agency, brought back guys in free agency over there on defense. You're not shutting out DeMeco Ryans in a draft. You're not going all offense in this draft, right? So what are they drafting? Defense. And what type of player would they be looking for? Well, there could be some absolutely late options for the secondary, guys who are depth players for the first few years of their career. And maybe as some of these other players move on, or you move on from those players, those guys have a chance to affect things for the Houston Texans. But they're pretty deep right now and pretty well set from a starter standpoint at the secondary. Don't see an early investment on that. A lot of these defensive tackles and even some of these defensive ends are coming to the end of their contracts. So maybe if the right defensive lineman was there at, say, 89, DeMeco Ryans would grab the phone from Nick Caserio, put the call in for the defensive lineman that he really likes. I'd like to see 4 offensive players, and then let's see what happens with a defensive player. I don't love the idea of a defensive player early on for the Texans. There's really only a handful of guys that I'd be excited about them getting at 58 instead of an offensive player, but I don't believe DeMeco Ryans is getting shut out. A trade down for the Texans is probably the perfect spot to add themselves a defensive player, because if you say got to the first part of the second round, you could address one of those immediate offensive needs, and then with some extra draft capital, maybe in the third round or the fourth round, you snag one of those defenders for DeMeco Ryans over there on his defense. Look, things are getting expensive. You're going to need good rookie labor coming up in the upcoming years as guys get more and more and more pricey on this Texans team. You'll need rookie labor that you can trust, and, well, the draft is where you can find that cost-controlled labor year after year after year. Those are my 4 burning questions for the Houston Texans in this upcoming draft. What are your 4 burning questions for the Texans? Maybe I asked the same questions. Maybe you have a 5th burning question, or maybe you already knew the answer to all those questions and you have another question. Well, ask it in the comment section down below on your way down there. Thumbs up on the video. Certainly would appreciate it. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Tell your friends to subscribe. Get them involved in this situation as well. Appreciate you watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. I can't wait till we talk Texans again soon.